them as well. So greetings everyone from wherever you're joining us, and welcome to today's webinar called Images of QA. And my name is Kanad, and I'm a senior quality engineer at Cisco Corporation here in Houston, Texas. Also one of the organizers of this meetup group. So before we get started with the content today, which I think you all really going to enjoy, I would like to briefly introduce our group, what we are about, and welcome our new members who joined us, our group recently. So this Houston Software Quality Engineering Group is a software quality assurance professionals to meet monthly, basically. And the vision of this group is educate, train, coach, and mentor each other on software quality. And our mission is basically to build a big community of software quality professionals and help each other to accomplish something bigger and build a better product. And I'd like to also go over some of the few notes how to participate on this today's session. So basically, duration of this session will be 1 hour. The speaker will be presenting 40 to 45 minutes, followed by a Q&A session, 15 to 20 minutes. And if you have any questions, please wait until the Q&A session starts, and you will be given a chance to unmute your microphone and address your questions, and we will try to answer those questions, as many questions we can. And finally, I'd like to remind anyone that today's presentation is being recorded, and you will receive an email with the links to view the recordings and the slides following the event today. And the last but not least, at the end of the today's sessions, we will be randomly selecting winner for event participation gift we announced earlier in our social media platform. And I will also announce the next August meeting session details at the end of this session. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce today's speaker for this session. Nate Custer is a senior manager at the big testing consultancy, or well known as TTC. And TTC is one of the leading global software assurance providers with a focus on helping organizations transform their way and deliver the technology. So Nate has a wealth of experience over 10 years in IT industry, and he's also representing TTC's global leadership team in United States. So really excited to have Nate here today with us in today's webinar. And so without any further ado, Nate, over to you.
Okay, thanks, Kanat. And we're going to try and first make sure we get the screens to swap. Kanat, can you stop your sharing your screen?
Sure, I'll stop it right now.
No, here, let's see if this works. Let me see here. So important question, can you guys see my screen? Thanks, Bill, I saw your thumb up, perfect.
Loud and clear, Nate. We can hear you, we can see you.
Great, so I'll get the slideshow at least starting a little bit, and I just want to say thanks for doing this. When I joined TTC, one of the reasons I joined was I wanted to learn to be a better tester. This is an interesting view. And as I was trying, and I wanted to be part of a community of testers. I had been in a company where I was the sole tester for a while, and so having a community and groups like this is really important to me. And I'm thrilled to see, and thanks to the team that is leading this and has been driving this. I saw a couple of people that have been involved in this for a couple of years now, so thanks to everybody who's been doing that. So I want to talk, and let's see if I can, let's see if we can do this a little better here. Maybe not. So you'll see it's slightly less than my full screen. That's okay. So I want to talk today about images of QE or QA or testing. The names for the work we do vary, and if you get into an argument about whether you are quality assurance or quality engineering or quality control or testing, I think I'm going to try and skip around that at least a little bit for now. So what I'm going to want to do is I want to talk about this idea of the image. It comes from a specific book, and it's kind of a philosophical idea. It's a way of talking about your worldview and your way of thinking and what you do. And once I introduce the idea, I want to talk about kind of 4 images for QA that just don't work for me anymore. Most of them I've had in the past, And I kind of now I've kind of said, it just can't go there. Then I'll talk about the current image that best sums up how I think what the role of QA is in a modern organization, and we'll have some time for questions. When I'm doing this, I'm unable to see chat as I'm presenting. So if you want to ask a question, feel free to unmute and ask it at any time. I'm happy having a little bit more flexibility as I present it. So please, let's keep this a little bit casual and get started. So I told you that the image is an idea. It comes out of a book by an author named Kenneth Boulding. And his idea is, the idea of the image is about knowledge and how knowledge works in life and society. That's the subtitle. It's a really wild book. It's kind of interdisciplinary. But Kenneth Boulding was one of the key thinkers in what we call systems theory. So if you talk to anyone who does like system analysis or system theory, they're drawing in part from Boulding in this work. If you want to go back, some of my testing heroes that I go to learn about testing, like Michael Bolton, James Bach on the contextual testing team, they go back and trace a lineage back to a guy named Jerry Weinberger, who was a crucial mentor and teacher for them. And Weinberger's ideas about how to test software were written when he was working with Kenneth Boulding. So I'm going to kind of start out big picture, and I would say that this has had an influence in how people think about testing for a long time. And I'm just going to have to ask you to kind of trust me with this one. To introduce the idea, I'm going to walk through a bit like Boulding introduces it in the first chapter of his book, but with me. So let me kind of start there. I'm giving this talk from Houston, Texas, right? I've been living in Houston for 20 years. And if you talk to me, the fact I'm giving it in a certain place, I'm at my house. And I'm at my house in part, I'm at my house, and the Houston is part of this area that was land of the Atakapikas Ishak tribe. So this was their land originally, and it's been settled by various waves of people, and the place that I'm in has a history, and that history impacts who I am in my worldview, or my understanding of the world. And I'm also not just, if there's not just a history in the past, there's also a sense of the moment, right? So I'm giving this talk virtually in part because we're in the middle of a pandemic that are hopefully near the end of a pandemic. The world's just starting to get back to something we might call normal. At least for me, it is. And this influences a lot, right? I would love to be giving this talk in a meeting room somewhere and be able to look everybody and see your eyes and your smiles, or see you shake your head when I say something stupid, but we're doing this virtually instead. And this is important, right? But beyond just being situated in a place and a time with a history, I'm also somebody who's got relationships, right? So this is a picture of myself a while ago at a cousin's wedding with my wife and my mom and brother and sister-in-law and some aunts, or uncle and cousins. I'm embedded in lots of relationships, both personally. I have friends. I also have professional relationships. So as Kanak mentioned, I work for a company called TTC. This is going to be the super quick plug for TTC that, my marketing guy makes sure I have in every talk. We're a specialist consulting firm that specializes in talking about quality. Our US, we've got offices all over the world. We've got our US headquarters is actually here in Houston. We're kind of up in the woodlands. So Houston adjacent, maybe for some of you. We work with companies across large enterprises, typically across lots of industries. I've been there with them for like I said, about 3 years, and this informs what I think. I talk about testing with them a lot. I'm not just a person in time and with relationships. I also have emotions, right? When I'm doing this, I try to sum up how would I feel giving a talk like this, and I'm super excited. I'm also a little nervous, right? All of that plays into how I do it. I get nervous every time I give a talk, and I've learned to just be like, oh, this is where I'm at. My emotions certainly play a role in my worldview. But beyond just emotions, I also have this crust of things that Boulding calls if-then assumptions. So these can be really typical, like later today, I'm going to go with my wife to the grocery store, and I expect that the grocery store will have bread. So there's an if-then. If I go to the grocery store today, there will be bread. There are really simple ones, like if I go to my car and hit the power button, it'll turn on. There are more complex ones too. Like I have this idea that if I test things more, I will find additional defects. That the amount of time that I spend testing something is linked to the amount of defects I find. That's an if-then assumption, and that one might be shakier than if I go to the store, there'll be bread. Maybe, maybe not, right? Beyond just if-then assumptions, I also have a series of values. So a pretty core value for me is that it's better to know information and make decisions than to be ignorant. So I'm always going to be a fan of, pushing that knowledge, and that the more informed we all are, the better choices we'll make, and the better it'll work out for everybody. Now, there are certainly people who think differently, and they would tell you that ignorance is bliss. That's okay. But these are the things, all of this shapes my behavior. And importantly, too, all of this impacts how I test, right? Where I am, the people that I know, the history that I know, and the impacts of that, my experiences, my values, my friends, the people I engage with, all of that impacts how I test, and it impacts everything we do. And then I'm just gonna kind of quote, because we're getting near the end of this section. And you could say, what I've been talking about here is knowledge, and Boulding says, but knowledge is perhaps not the good word, because knowledge has some idea of truth or validity to it, right? And my subjective, what we're talking about here is what I believe to be true. My subjective knowledge. I think if I test stuff longer, that I will find more defects. It's possible that I could test for another day and find nothing, right? It's about these are my beliefs, my view. We use a word like worldview. And Boulding says, perhaps I would rather say my image of the world. And so this image is the summation of all the different bits of knowledge that I have and believe about the world around me, that I've collected from all the different sensory inputs that I've got, and relationships, etc. And so Boulding then kind of lays out his 4 propositions for how this stuff works. He says everybody operates out of an image or a set of images that you have, and your images shape your behavior. And then Boulding says, importantly, it's worth noting images change. And he says, what changes our image is a message. It's some kind of information or experience or something, that's some kind of sense data that comes in that change. And the way our image changes is the meaning of a message. I found this actually super useful to think about how I'm testing when I'm deciding what to test. Because I say, what's my current image of the software I'm testing? And maybe I think that the software I'm testing is great and bug-free. And maybe I think it's like horrible, and I don't trust it at all. What would change my mind about the software I'm testing? What could I do? What experiment could I do that would change other people's image of the software I'm testing? What could I show them, or show them it works, right? That's what we're doing. We're trying to create meaning and understanding about software we're engaged with. What he doesn't say that I think is super important to call out here is, if you want to change your behavior, you change your image first. And so as we talked about kind of digital transformations or QA transformations, or how you improve how you're testing or what you're doing or your organization and your testing practices, I'm going to say it's really important to understand the image your team's operating out of. What do they think their role is? And to also ask, what could you change about that image that might let them do better testing or be more effective or can add more value, right? So this is why this focus on images is so important for me. And this is why I want to talk about 4 images that I've had or encountered widely in our industry that just no longer work for me. Does everyone kind of understand what I mean by an image? Get something there?
Yes. Thank you for the explanation.
Great. Okay. So I know this is kind of a topic that's a little, if you said like images of QA, you may not think that's where I'm going, but hopefully we got a little introduction and we're in a better shape. So let's talk about some images that don't work for me anymore. The first one is when I joined a QA team for the first time, I thought of myself as a bug hunter, right? It's what QA does, where we hunt bugs. So what is the bug hunter? One of the ones is they'll talk about finding bugs, and you'll hear them boast like, I find bugs other people miss. If you're outside of the QA organization and using software, when you stumble across something you think is a bug, your first thing is, did anyone test this? I know when I'm using like Zoom, I sometimes say, man, I wish I could be testing Zoom. I'd find so many. What's the bug hunter value? The defect count's really important. You'll hear them tell you all about the defects and how many they found or how many more they found than last time or things like that. And there are some assumptions that I found the bug hunters often make. One of them is like, if we find the bugs, the customers won't. Another one might be that there's this idea that every release has about the same number of defects. So I've had teams and been on teams where they said, you know, last release we found 15 defects. This release we've only found 10. We need to keep working. There are more out there, right? And that value of what you value and prioritize sweeps better. When have I've been through this? I said at the start that, and I'm going to try and do for each of these images a story of both where I got and why it didn't work. For me, when I started in QA, this is what I thought I was doing. And I was really nervous for my first job. Was moving from an organization where I was a user of the software to the software vendor and joining their QA organization as a developer to write QA tools. And they said, well, start as a QA tester and make sure you understand who you're writing the tools for. It's okay. And when I walked in, I had a secret plan for how I was going to find a bunch of bugs. Because I was sure that if I didn't find a bug my first day, that my coworkers would judge me for that, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, I got to have a bug. I got to have a plan for this. And so this software was kind of configuring a server. And so my theory was, I bet you if I make the server's hard drive go read-only halfway through a process, the software won't handle it well. It'll have a bug there. Like, I bet it can't handle that corner case. What are you trying to do when you're configuring something that you can't write to the disk? It's gonna. I was really proud of myself, and I walked in, and I started like I got my stuff set up, and I started to go do this and say, "Hey, look, I found a bug," and then I got introduced to what they were actually doing, and I showed a colleague of mine this, and he goes, "Yeah, but how often do disks go bad and go read only?" And I said, "Well, where I worked, we had about 10,000 disks on servers across our farm, and we'd have one or two go bad a week." I said, "Oh, it's pretty corner case then, isn't it?" He goes, "Yeah." And this is really the thing for me. It says, well, what about something that would impact lots of customers? If you're too deep in this bug hunter image, you get exposed to what I think is the real flaw of it. And that's, I'm going to do it this way. You look at it and go, is this a risk to the business? Just focusing exclusively on finding defects without caring about how important they are or what the risk to the businesses are that are using them or your users, you're bound to get confused and lost. And you're bound to spend a bunch of time and effort on things that aren't super important and potentially miss things that are really important. So this was my first image was like, oh, if I find some corner case that no one's thought of before, it's perfect. And maybe it is, but also quite possibly I'm not focusing on what's really important. So my second image of QA after that was, I said, we were the defenders of quality. I'm like, oh, quality here might mean not just like defects, but also include risk. And this is better. And I've came across this cartoon on LinkedIn in a different tester group that I thought perfectly captured the way that people who have this idea of themselves as a defender of quality work. So let me just kind of say this, right? I said, this is what the job of a tester is. And I think you'll see why people love this image. Who's the hero in this cartoon? Well, we are, right?
Custer.
Everyone wants to be the hero. Well, maybe you don't want to be the sacrificial hero, right? But you're the hero of the story. You'll say things like, we're the voice of quality in the organization. You'll also hear things like, if they just let me test properly, I'd find we'd do so much better off. And they're very much attentive quality tend to be people that are focused on process, and they think they have to sign off on a release. If they don't sign off, it can't go. They think they have veto power on releases going out. And they tend to be people who really are into really formal test plans and really formalized ways of like, how many test cases are there and what are all the unique test cases? And then there's this theory that if we tested perfectly, there would be no unfound defects, right? We just did our job right, we get there. And they're constantly under threat from two things. One is people who are trying to push to go faster, or to skip parts of testing, or to not follow the process, and business who wants to push anyway. So why, like, is this something that a couple of people are like, I've been there, or I know that kind of feeling? Does this resonate for anybody?
Yes, for sure.
Okay. The problem I've got with the defender of quality is, in my experience, you end up a bit like Don Quixote, right? You're off to save the day, and you charge against the dragon, then you come back defeated every single time because it wasn't actually a dragon, it was a windmill. I saw this most often in my first QA role. We'd find some defects and we'd go up and they would say, is it time to release this or not? And I'd watch we'd kind of brief our QA manager, and this is so important. You can't let them do this. It'll ruin our reputation with our customers, and we care about customers, and we haven't had time to test this fully. And we'd send our QA manager up to meet the meeting with the different leadership, and he'd come back and say, we're releasing in a week, test as best you can. Right? And it seemed like every time that we were so sure that we had to stop this, he'd come back defeated. And what I didn't realize was that we had one image of risk, and what the risks were with the defects that we knew about, or the tests that we knew we hadn't done yet. But there were a lot of other risks to the business. I didn't fully understand this till I was in a role where I was the QA leader, and I sat in a meeting and said, we can't test this. This is like brand new feature. And the CEO looked at me and said, we signed a contract that we would deliver this functionality by a certain date. If we don't, we have to pay a penalty.
Wow.
And that penalty is 10 times our revenue for the year. What's more risky, pushing this feature that we haven't tested fully, or paying 10 times our revenue for the year?
Push the feature, I think.
You push it, right? And this is the thing. Ultimately, we produce software for a business that provides a service. And I'm going to tell, my experience has been that business is going to win over QA every time. If you are not releasing software because there's a risk of its quality being low, and you're not considering the risk to the business of not releasing the software, there's that risk will usually win out in the end, especially long term. The other thing is, why this doesn't work for me is I believe there's no end to what you can test. That you can always think of more things, that you can find things. I mean, the classic example here is that any bit of software, or most bits of software, have some sense of time. And so the software will work great about, I worked on some billing software, and we would figure out when to invoice customers. And it worked great until we got on a leap year. And then there was an extra day in February, and we didn't handle that quite right. Like anything time-based, you're like, the inputs are exactly the same, the output should be exactly the same, except one of the inputs is the day of the year, or the day of the minute and the time, and that'll be different every time you test, right? So there's always things to do it. There are more perspectives. If sometimes there's a saying. I at one point worked for a project management company that worked at Ford, and they said there comes a life of every project at Ford where you have to kill the engineers and ship the car, because the engineers will always find one more improvement, right? Like, nope, done, ship. So I think QA, we can be in that same kind of situation where there's always another thing I can think to test. Sometimes I have to decide when to ship. So the third image I've got is what I'm going to call the QA Essentialist. This is not one that I've ever believed, but it's one I've come across a lot. And a QA Essentialist is a person, there we go, who sees QA as, what they say, maybe they talk about development is about creation, testing is about destruction. They'll say that some people have a QA mindset and other people don't. So that person is a natural born tester. Man, see, I always find things. What do they value? They're really proud of being a tester and testing, and that's important, right? I think often in our industry, there's a general assumption that development is more important than testing. The role of testers is secondary or not as important. Certainly when it comes time to cut budget, you'll see testers tend to get cut first and developers, right? However, so it's important to be proud of that identity, to value it. There are two kind of assumptions here that I think are worth calling out. One is that it sees testing as a contest, an us versus them. The other is that it just thinks people are born to test. I've seen this most often when I've worked with teams that are converting to Agile. And the problem is that most Agile teams I've been on, the ratio of developers to testers is there's more developers than testers. And typically they end up finishing most of their user stories at close to the end of a sprint. And the developers hand them all over to testing at the end. And then testing gets compressed and struggles to meet it. Does that match anyone's experience of working on an Agile team? Where it all gets dumped on you at the end and you don't have time. And when I see this, it's the testers. I said, well, how about asking developers to help test for some stuff? Can a developer test what another developer did? No. They can't do that. I'm a tester. They're a developer. They can't think about it right. They can't do that. I've also seen it when I asked or suggested to teams that developers be involved in automated testing. And they basically say, no, this is very different. This is testing, not development. There are boundaries. We need to stick to our silo. And this QA Essentialist mindset for me really struggles to become an Agile team of real T-shaped testers, right? Of T-shaped team members, where team members have specialties, but also can help across lots of different areas. And sometimes you end up ignoring the input and the thought, the value that asking developers what to test can give you. Now, I'm not saying that you should only ask developers what to test, or that if developers say, just test this, you should believe them. Those are probably both wrong, but I think there are some things. So for me, it doesn't work. It harms teamwork. I think that especially things like automation frameworks, but also I've seen teams where they say, I'm a developer, unit testing is a responsibility. That's a testing responsibility. And it just lets developers sit and kind of not contribute where they can contribute, or maybe they may be able to best contribute. The last problem I have with this kind of essentialist idea is if testing is a mindset, if testing is something you're born with, you're either born with it or you're not born with it. If testing is a skill that you learn, then it's important to have training and mentoring, right? And I firmly believe that like most things, skills that you learn, it's important to train and do well. If you want to, Michael Bolton says a really great one. If you want testing to be thought of as important to a team's development, well, why don't you make sure your testing is as important to the team? Do a good job being a tester, and you'll start to get respect. There's some history there, but I certainly think that learning how to do your job more effectively, training, talking to experts, these are all ways that we improve our skill set for everything else. And to think that testing is an exception to that just doesn't work for me. So my final image that I've had for testing, and this is the one that I had most recently and had to give up, was I said that the role of a testing team is to be like an intelligence agency for a country. We talk about giving good reports, good analysis, providing a clear picture. I'm the one who, you got this software. I'm going to be the one who tells you where it is, what it's like, what the risks are, so that you can decide the risks of acting and the risks of not acting, continuing to test, not. Often feel people who say that, who talk about things being above their pay grade, are saying, well, I warned you about that. The trouble with this intelligence agency assumption is that you decide that the choice is someone else's, not yours, right? Now, to some degree, that's true. I've talked about, the problem of being the defender of quality, where you think that you have a veto and you don't, and that being really painful. The flip side of that is, if you think you've got, you're like, I provide input, I give you information, you decide what to do, that can be a challenge too. So let me touch about where that's happened to me. I've been on a project I've just rotated off for about 1.5 years, my current client. And in that project, we had just gotten a brand new VP who was in charge of the project. And within a week of the VP joining and bringing his new leadership, they had 2 of the biggest customers found defects in production. And one of them said, I'm about to onboard my next, my largest customer. We're going to double how many clients we have on your system. I cannot have you breaking anything. So stop all new development. Don't push anything into production, because I just found this last bug that you should have caught and got all the way to production. I can't fix that, but no more, no changes until we get our next client on there and we're good. Because we can't take the risk that you keep breaking stuff and you don't know what you're doing or don't know why you broke it. No more risks. Leave me with a solid place to onboard this large client. We said, okay, we promise 2 weeks, no new deployments. We'll fix this one thing and nothing new will go to production. 3 days later, our second largest customer came to us and said, I found this defect. You have to fix it immediately. And the VP was stuck saying, what do we do? It turned out that they had both gone above his head to the CIO, and the CIO had promised one team that we wouldn't change anything, and then promised the next team that we would fix that immediately. We had to stop for a second, well, what? And at that time, the VP sat down with the QA leadership and said, okay, be frank with me. What should I do? Is this change risky enough that I shouldn't push it in because we've got that client onboarding? Or should we push it and take the gamble that the other client will? What have you tested? What can't you test? What are you concerned about? We talked through all of that. And I said, great. Now I'm going to go around the room and I need each of you to answer the question, what would you do if you were in my shoes? And I froze. Because that's his call, not mine, right? Except I had been with that project for 1 year. I had a lot more information about what was going on than he did. He was just there for a week. By refusing to take responsibility and pick a side or say, this is what you should do, that's not doing the best for him or for his team. He's asking for me to do it. And I think this is where the idea of QA as an intelligence agency, we'll inform you, we'll give you all the options, but you got to be the decider. You're the president, falls down for me. Is that sometimes you also have to give your opinion and then be okay if your opinion isn't taken, right? Sometimes you have to get that crystal clear, especially when you've got more information than anybody else and more context. The historian Howard Zinn said it this way. He said, you can't be neutral on a moving train. You can't stay out of history. You've got to decide what you recommend, right? And I couldn't sit in that conversation and tell a VP, that's your call. I gotta tell them what I think. So I've spent a while kind of talking about images that don't work for me, and that's fun, and we can all laugh at why they don't work, but I think it's also responsible to say, what do you use now? What goes forward? My image has kind of become this. I think the role of QA is to look for everybody who cares about quality in an organization, and then to empower them to turn that quality into action. So across the SDLC, my team is everyone in the organization who cares about quality. And my goal as a leader is to help them find ways to express that care in specific actions. So this isn't a test strategy or development process. This applies. I'm on some projects that are fully waterfall, where they deploy on a quarterly basis. And I'm on projects where we're deploying to production, multiple times a day. And this kind of question, who cares about quality in the organization and what can you do to improve it, works for everybody, right? How do I help you convert your concern and your care into actions that improve the overall quality? That's worked for me. Does that make sense? Before I move on, let me pause for a second and say, does that kind of make sense about what's the role? Who's on the quality team and what's our role? Anybody who cares about quality is on the quality team. And my role is to find ways to help them take actual concrete steps that improve quality. That means if it's a developer, I want to talk about how you do code review, about what static analysis tools you use, about best practices for coding. If I'm talking to a product owner, I want to talk about how can we involve thinking about how you test this and, scoping that, maybe a BDD process how can we build that in? How can we improve your acceptance criteria? How can we help the team understand better? That means when I'm talking to customers who care about quality, I want to learn from the customers about what am I missing? What do I not understand about your business or your concern? What things can you tell me that would change my image of how people use this software? All of that is my QA team. And as a testing leader, and a leader in this sense is anyone who decides to care about the success of the whole project, or about quality, my goal is to find how can we help every person who cares take actions to improve it. Get visibility, take action. Because I fundamentally believe that if we're better, if we all understand the situation, we all can improve things. And that I've also found most people in an organization want to care about quality. It's just about figuring out how you can help them actually be effective in doing that, right? So a business analyst wants to see a quality product delivered to their client. How can I help them do it? Oh, well, if you itemize the different things here, that would really help. Okay, so it's important. I want to talk for a second about KPIs because I've been working in a large financial services company for the last year and a half, and we've got hundreds of applications, and KPIs are crucial, especially as you start to try and scale across lots of organizations. How do you know if a strategy of trying to push quality across an entire organization is working or not working? And I just also want to give a quick warning here. I don't know if you guys know Goodhart's Law or if you've heard of this. Goodhart was an economist in England, and he pointed out that whenever you take something that's measuring something and you set it as a target, it ceases to be a good measure. And the reason is everybody optimizes around making sure that the target is met, not the what it's measuring. So as an example, we have some patching tests that we run every time we patch any of the OS environments that we're working with. These are kind of like smoke tests. They're very small bit. And we wanted to see that our pass rate, so this is like if I upgrade the operating system or apply an operating system patch, I'll restart the machine, everything should come up correctly and the system should still work. This is a pretty low bar in terms of quality to catch. We've set a target across the organization that those patching tests should rarely fail. And if they do fail, it shouldn't be because the test was poorly written. It should be some other reason, like the application was wrong. What happens is every time that those tests fail, they mark it as one of the, they blame something that isn't the test, so their numbers look great. And so I've got a situation where there are teams where the actual pass rate is 80%, but they say, well, yes, it's 80%, but of that 20% that failed, all of that was not our fault. So we're 100%. And they're really proud of how stable they are and how stable their application is. And they said, see, we got 100% of our patching tests are actually passing. I said, well, that's actually 80% people. Like, let's fix the problems that are happening. That kind of optimization around any target, if you publish a KPI, your team will optimize for the KPI, whatever it is. So if you're publishing what your velocity is over time, what happens is the teams start estimating with more and more story points and then doing it. And so the same work looks like your velocity is increasing, right? It's really easy to play games like that. And the pressure gets to everybody. So a couple of the ones that I would still look for anyway. The first, for me, the best overall measure of quality is a net promoter score from your users. How likely are your customers to recommend your tool to other users? I think this tells you more about your software than the number of defects that were found or the defect leakage percentage. Because if you've built the thing that you were supposed to build, but it's not the right thing for the customer, they wouldn't call out a quality application. And if you've used software that only works if you use it the way the person intended and their intent's really weird, you don't talk about, it's not a happy experience. You don't want to use it more and you don't want to buy it. You can also look at how long people are spending in your tool. So user engagement, user growth, these are important. My last one I found is the rate of feature requests. So I found that applications that customers love get a lot more feature requests than applications customers hate. And the reason is, if you're good at doing some things, customers want to use you more. And they start imagining, wouldn't it be great if I could use you, but you could also solve this other problem too? Or I could use, like, this would be great here. There's a great quote from JWZ, he's one of the Netscape evangelists and lead developers for Netscape and Firefox. And he said, every application will ultimately expand to includes email of some kind. Because if you're doing everything in your tool, you don't want to leave the tool. Wouldn't it be great if I had a way to send chats from my IDE? So I don't have to stop coding. I can just look over and ask a question. I can see it. Wouldn't it be great if I could open up website documentation in my IDE? And if you've seen how IDEs expand and become more and more and more, you've seen this exact phenomena. And the more that they include, the more your users want you to include. The further away you get from one little tool that does this one thing, when you keep seeing those feature requests pile up, that's telling you that people like using your tool. So 3 KPIs I would look for. That is the end. So I've got some time for question and discussion at the end. I think we're right on time in terms of the 45 minutes to talk and 15 to discuss. So I'm going to go ahead and try and raise or prioritize people talking. If you want to unmute and ask a question, please fire away.
Awesome. Thanks, Nate. That was a great presentation. So for the attendees, so if anyone has a question, so you can unmute your microphone and we can go one by one. Thanks all.
Nate, I have one question. So how that technical aspect comes into this? So what's the value that technical skill to that image of QA?
So I think certainly if we're testing software, you need to understand something about software, and that people with more technical skills are able to do different kinds of testing and are able to contribute to things like test automation, or one of the crucial things I found is like, how easy is it to get a test environment? And so skills like system administration and DevOps are also super useful, right? I think when I'm working with a team, I want to find the technically skilled people and ask, how can we best use your technical skills? Is that teaching others? Is that building automation? Is that building testing environments? I talked a little bit about building a testing tool. The first thing we did was give the ability of our testers to have a virtual machine that had any version of our software installed. And I gave them a starting point. So they were all maintaining their VMs themselves, and they had limited amounts. And they would have to say, well, to test this, I need this version, so I'm gonna switch. When I gave them the ability to have VMs on demand, their productivity increased dramatically before test automation even, right? That was something where we were able to use our technical skills to help improve the quality. And we started building, each team started making builds of their stuff nightly and being able to test it as well. And so the developers could play with stuff a lot earlier. And the development environment where they mocked a lot became replaced with this environment where they could actually have fully built versions of their software on demand whenever they needed to. It also meant when we had a defect open, we could save the exact machine where the defect happened, so the developer could go back and inspect it and tweak it and say, if I change this line, does it work different? And that was super helpful, right? So I think I'm a big fan of automation in general, and in test automation, it's a lot of what I do. But I think the technical skills have to be broader than just thinking about test automation. And we have to be leveraging the team, the broader team, as much as possible too. It's not, if you've got a QA team with a ton of really skilled technical people, I think you're very lucky in the exception rather than the norm. And so I look for technical skills in the team and also outside of it as well. Does that answer your question, Yusuf?
Yes, yeah, I agree, and I like that the sentence you say that technically skill is broader than the test automation. Yes, yeah, that's a nice, and I think it's a good one. So most of the time people think technical skill means just a test automation, Selenium, Java or something, but it's broader than that. Yeah, you should be able, as a QA engineer, you should be able to challenge developer in terms of technical stuff. Yeah.
Absolutely. And sometimes, I mean, sometimes the skills that I add are system administration skills. Sometimes they're, I understand databases in a SQL or system architectures. Sometimes it's automation or development. Certainly, all of those skills are useful in a testing team and are useful in a team that's trying to care about quality. Both. So, yeah.
What do you think about problem-solving skill and system thinking?
I think they're super important. So I think this is they're part of what makes testing a unique discipline from just technical skills, right? And when I'm hiring someone to join a testing team, I kind of assume there are three things I'm looking at. One is domain knowledge. How much do you know about the industry, about the terms that are being used? How much can you understand what a customer is saying, what the software is supposed to do? The second is what I call testing skills. And this is about, do you have problem solving skills? Do you have analysis skills? Can you think through what could happen here and what are the possibilities? Can you think about the different types of inputs that have to be considered and how you can permutate through them? Basic things like truth tables or techniques like boundary testing, etc. Those are testing techniques. And a third is technical skills that can use the tools that we're using for automation or environment creation, things like that. And if you find someone who's an expert in all three, I think that's a unicorn and you should hire them immediately, whatever it costs. Typically, what I'm looking for is to find someone who's good at 2 out of the 3, and then I'll teach you the third, whatever it is, right? If you've got a person who understands the technology, understands testing, and they come to a new business domain, they can pick it up. They can pick up the technology, they can pick up the side of things, they can pick up the testing side. If they're a programmer who's coming, who understands the business, who understands programming, but doesn't really understand testing, I can work with that too. But I typically am looking for, if I said that those are the 3 legs of the stool, I want 2 out of the 3 to be good when I hire. That's how I look at it.
Good. Thanks, Nate.
No problem.
Hey Nate, this is Jan. I have a question. What about organizations that don't believe in QA or QE, or they don't need one because they have their own developers, they have their own CI/CD pipelines that are built?
Yeah.
Who becomes the quality champion? That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, I think so. I saw that you post that term quality champion. I think that's a good one. Quality coach is another one. I can't give a talk about saying words matter and then say, oh yeah, there are lots of these things and they're all the same. The words, these image of coach or champion matters. And I think that organizations need someone to champion it. But I think that if you've got a team that is heavy on automation, that has a CI/CD pipeline that's doing a lot of things, they're doing red-green deployments, they're doing canary deployments with A/B testing, et cetera, that can replace parts of testing or what we would, other approaches to testing, right? I would say, you know what, you've got a testing approach here, right? You put 5% of your clients on the new site, the new version, and 95 on the old, and you monitor to see if they perform the same. That's a test. Even if there's no one who's got the job title testing in the organization. And so then I would say, how's it working for you? And if it's working great, because your people are thinking about it, your devs are writing lots of great unit tests, they're doing TDD. If it's working great for you, keep doing it. And if you're struggling, let's talk about how we could do it better. So I try really hard, in part because I'm in testing, I'm exposed to like mistakes of thought a lot, like biases, to try to look at the data and look at what's happening and not, like, I think most companies need a quality champion somewhere, whether their job title is that or not. However, I'm willing to be proved wrong. There is an open source project called SQLite. Has anyone used that? It's a small like database as a single flat file. It's used in lots of tools. And they've got thousands and thousands of unit tests, and they do fuzz testing and mutation testing and a bunch of really advanced testing practices that are all developer driven. And that organization is an open source project, it's kind of all developer driven. There's not a formal testing process, but in terms of the number of defects that have leaked, the last couple of defects that have been reported turned out to be CPU bugs where the CPU logic was wrong, not their code logic, right? So I would cite that as an example on the extreme of it. If it's working for you, who am I to tell you to stop doing it? I think most people are not SQLite. Most companies are.
Yeah.
And they'll also, if you propose a change and you don't have matching unit tests, they'll refuse your change. So I don't know most companies that are like that either. So,
I know companies that don't believe in unit testing, but yeah.
yeah.
This is Seema from Debascom. I have a quick question. The KPIs that you presented, is there a way to capture those KPIs without a customer survey? Or is that the only way to get those?
So user engagement and user growth are things that you can track via monitoring, not customer surveys. right? User engagement is how long does the customer spend in your tool? Is the average customer using your tool more or less? And the user growth is a number of how many users you've got. So those you can, by looking at how production's going, you can tell a lot about how your tool is being used and what they're most interested in, right? And if you're testing a product and you're not looking at how customers are using it and the usage stats, I strongly recommend that that be a practice you start to look at somehow. It can be challenging, but certainly I've been surprised in the past on projects that I thought I understood really well. And I found out that something I thought was not important, that the majority of our customers spend a lot of time there. And I was like, oh, I'm wrong. So I tend to, when I'm looking for data or looking to research or understand things better, I try to focus on what surprises me the most, where I think this is what you should do, and it turns out I'm wrong. Those are the ones that I try to understand best and let those influence my work going forward the most. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, the promoter score, however, is something that may not come without.
Yeah, that certainly is a thing that, like, that works a bit better as a KPI for a thing where you've got some kind of customer engagement surveys and tracking. But many marketing teams have that already. So, and you can attempt to do the same thing, right? You can talk to your customers and ask them, you know, okay, scale of 1 to 10, how likely would you be to recommend this tool to other people? The Net Promoter Score is a pretty well-known marketing metric and customer service metric that I found works well for tools and companies too.
Yep, makes sense. Thank you.
No problem. Okay, so I think we're running out of time for conversation. The one question I always ask after I give this talk, and I'm interested to hear, is one, did you recognize the 4 images that I talked about not working? You'd seen it in the past. I was curious to get some feedback there. The other is, what image did I not talk about that you see used a lot, or is an image that works for you? So think about, how would you describe the image, and can you crystallize it to an image of how you think about testing, or about how you see testing thought about in organizations? And I'm always interested to hear, like, oh, you should do this one or do this one. I learn a lot that way. So if you've got your thoughts on that, please reach out. I'll put up, make sure I switch here to my contact info, but please, you know, message me on LinkedIn, send me an email. I'd love to talk to you about it and learn some more about different ways to think about QA and the role of QA in an organization. So thanks, everybody.
Awesome. Thanks, Nate. Thanks for the amazing presentation, and thanks for your time and effort you put into this community as well. So let me quickly share my screen so we can do this drawing for the winners of the participant. So let me share my screen, guys, quickly. So let me know if you can see my screen.
Gotcha.
So I just entered everybody's name into this list of the names here. So I'm going to go ahead and click start button. And HPO people. So let's see.
It's Bethel. Yeah, it's hard.
Oh, all right. Sorry about that.
No, you're good.
So,
Everybody mispronounced it.
congratulations. So I just wanted to show the screen before I start picking the random people. So I think I have your details on the. Are you the member of the group in Houston Software Quality Engineering Group? If you are, so I can find you among the members, and I'll reach out to you. It's going to be.
I don't think I am. I was invited to it today, so it's my first time, but I can join it.
Yeah, please join it, and I'll find you, and I will message you virtual gift card to you.
Oh, thank you. I was not expecting that. First timer.
Awesome. So, guys, before you go, our next session will be in August 19th. It'll be same day, Thursday of the week. And this time we will wanna do it 1 hour earlier. So because most of the people ask us to make it around the lunchtime so they can join us. So, so the topic and the speaker for our next session. So the speaker's name will be Artem Golubov. He's a co-founder and CEO of the company called TestRigger. So the Artem and his company helping companies to reduce the number of the human efforts spent on the testing and improve the test coverage at the same time. So basically the topic we're going to deep dive in is going to be what is the specification driven development and why it works where the BDD, behavior driven development, fails. So also he's going to deep dive and try to explain the definition of SDD and its actors and comparison between SDD and BDD, advantages and disadvantages of SDD. And he's going to represent some real world case studies. So we're going to publish this upcoming event in our meetup group and meetup platform. Also, please join us in our social media platform, which is, you can find it in the same meetup platform. If you go to our meetup group and then scroll down, you can see all of our social media platforms where we can upload the latest information, articles, and upcoming events, guys. Once again, thank you very much, Nate, and thanks a lot for our participants to join this call. And I hope you guys learned a lot because I did, and I will see you guys in the next session. Thank you, everyone.